working. I'm gonna press B, and now I'm huge. Oh, that was 2 seconds, and I shrank. Now, why it does this weird 2 on the Y and then 1 on the X. Welcome back to Arcade. I am Super Tommy, and in this video, we're gonna look at 5 tips to help you get started with Kaboom.js. Now, Kaboom.js is a fairly new JavaScript game library, but it's got a really fun syntax or coding style. So here is Kaboom.js. I can actually make this a little bigger. And you see it's got this nice component pattern where you create your entities solely by composing components. And so it's hosted by repl.it. You can find their GitHub here if we click this. It's on the repl.it GitHub. It's still fairly new. Updates are being added to it all the time. We've been updated here 9 hours ago. We're at version 0.4.1. Now, it's already changed quite a bit since when I first looked at it a few weeks ago, but a lot of improvements have already been made to it. They're actively working on it. So if you were deciding to try Kaboom.js to make some simple games, since it is much easier to learn than something like Phaser.js or Phaser 3, it's got a very simple API. It's very easy to think about. It is functional, and it has a really fun composable component system. So we're going to go through 5 tips to help you get started making games with Kaboom.js. So let me make myself smaller here and set up my window back. So we have this demo running. This is our Kaboom.js game where we're using NPM. Now you could run Kaboom in repl.it as well. That's on the website. Then your environment will be set up. Now we're using Arcade's Phaser parcel template, which is really just a shell to make any game, any app, really. So if we look here at our package.json, we have no dependencies since we are including Kaboom as a script tag in our index file. So right here, we're including Kaboom. Let's make this bigger. So we're including Kaboom here as a script tag as it's recommended by Kaboom, just because there's so many changes going on right now. So you can get the latest changes more easily. And the way that Kaboom works is, let's go here. So let's go into tip number 1, how to split your code into files, as we're doing with the first one. So the other ones that we're doing, just to go over this, we're going to go into collisions, animations, creating a level, and then making custom components. Those are your 5 tips in this video. So now let's just go to our Kaboom.js. So what we have here is Kaboom loaded in the global scope. So when you add that script tag to load Kaboom, you get this Kaboom object at the window level, so at the global level. Now, if you're using VS Code and you've set up your project to use Kaboom in VS Code, and you got JS config set up, you may get some errors from VS Code telling you that that Kaboom is not recognized, that there is no such thing called Kaboom anywhere that VS Code is aware of inside the browser environment, and that's true. So what we do is we add a global.d.ts to our source folder here. Source global.d.ts, that's a declaration file for TypeScript, and that's going to help VS Code know that Kaboom does exist, or at least trust us. We're telling you that Kaboom exists. What we have here is the clear interface window. We give it we add a property Kaboom, and it's going to be of this function type, which takes a conf optionally and returns any. We also declare the var here, Kaboom conf any, just so you can do window.kaboom as well as just Kaboom without using window dot. Now, for splitting our code into files, you see a lot of the Kaboom examples are just in one file. I think all the example projects are all in one file, but you can split them up into multiple files, and when you do that, you're going to need to use the same Kaboom instance that you made, so you're not making new Kaboom instances each time you have a new file. So what we did here is we have this Kaboom.js file. Let me go here, and we create our Kaboom instance here, and then we just export it as K. So that's basically the same as the documentation here. Initialize Kaboom context, const K equals Kaboom. We're just exporting it ourselves. So you can pass in the conf for Kaboom here. and then we export the default here. So we have both exports. We have the normal export and a default export, and then that means we can use it in our scenes as well as in our main file here. So when we import K here, it's going to be the same Kaboom instance we created in Kaboom.js for all our other files. And so let's look at our hello world. So we've split up our scenes into individual files. So we go to our hello world file here. We made each scene its own file. And so we import Kaboom at the top like we've done in main.js, and then our scenes are just a function. So if you've done React programming or something like that, where the components are all functions, in Kaboom's world, all your scenes are also just functions. So we create this function, call it hello world, and that's our hello world scene. Now what we did here is just add a very simple entity that has a position, has some text, and it has an origin, and that's what you see here. And then when we want to use it, we go back to our main here, we import our hello world scene, which is just a function, and then we do k.scene, so we're adding a new scene and we're calling it hello world, and we're giving it our scene here. So this maps to Kaboom like so. You see k.scene main and then some function. We're doing the same thing. We're doing k.scene and name and then some function. The function just happens to be defined in a different file. So that's how we're going to split up our code into files. When you're making a more complex Kaboom game, you're going to want things in multiple files just for organization's sake. And we're here running the k.go, which just runs our scene, and that's why you see this. So that is how we're splitting code into separate files in Kaboom. Now, number 2, we're going to look at collisions. So let's actually comment that out. Comment in our collision scene, which has nothing in it. So let's open our collision scene here. Collisions. So we're going to do 2 things here. We're going to add a player, then we're going to add a floor to show you how to make the player collide with the floor. So let me check my notes here. Okay. So first thing, let's make a player. So in Kaboom, everything is just all your entities, all your like objects or like game objects. If you're used Phaser, you want our Phaser videos, or you've used other game engines like Unity or other ones, Godot. There's always like an object that is what your entity, your player, your enemy, your NPC, your rock, your bush, whatever it is, it's like an object, like a class. But in Kaboom, you don't have that. You just have components, and you just put them in an array, and whatever components you put in that array is what defines your entity. So in this case, we're going to make a player, and it's going to be made up of components. So let's import our Kaboom instance here. And we have it at there. So we have it, it's dot dot just to go up 1 level since we're in the scenes. So we go up to source, and then here's Kaboom. So player is going to be k.add, which is going to be just add a bunch of components together, and we give it a list of components. So we're going to make a simple square rectangle here. So let's say 32 by 64. So k, let's give it a position. Now we can get width out of Kaboom. This is the width of our game here. Let's make that half. And then we're just going to put this guy at, no, let's make that 0 at the very top. K.body, so that it'll start being affected by gravity. So here's our player. Before we do the floor, let's just do a console.log player. You're going to see rectangle here, and it's going to fall down. Let's just open this up. Aha, didn't mean to do that. Let's dock that. Great. And so here's our player. You can see all the things that the player can do, or you can call on it. So when we did body, it actually added an area. So this is just how Kaboom components can add other components to itself, or to the entity that it's making. So you can also get a feel for what you can do. Player, you can do action, all these other things, jump. There's a position right here that's added by the post component. So when you want to know like what exactly exists on your entities, once you've combined your components, the built-in components, you can just log it out to see. But now let's just refresh this. You saw that our dude just fell down. So gravity is working. That's cool. Now let's just add a floor. So to do a floor, we're really just gonna also compose some components together to make a floor. Now, a floor really just has like a position, like a place in the world, and then a rectangle, just to define how big the floor is. In our case, we're going to give it a position, and it's going to be at 0, x is 0, and then we're going to do k.height. So it's going to be basically at the bottom here, right here, and we're going to give it a rect, right, just like k.rect, like our player here, and it's going to be k.width. So the width and height of the rect is going to be width, and then just base 50 height. And now one thing we're going to do is give it solid, so that the player won't go through it. That's what the solid component does. So now you have it. You have your player, you have your floor, and they are colliding. Now we can also, just for funsies, I'm going to just paste some code here. You get the general gist of this here. I'm going to add some other component here, and I guess we don't really need to store that. So now multiple things are gonna collide with each other. Change that text, right? So if we actually made this -100, boom, right? So now our text here, we just add, like we made text in Hello World, if you remember, which is basically just this. But all we do to make our text physics enabled, let's say, is to add a body, make it solid, and then it won't fall through the floor, and the player can also fall on it. Now we can also move this, let's see, let's put this at, nope, that's too far. Let's put this at, right, now you see how it went through that. So you want to avoid that. Make the player also solid, and ta-da, and there we go. So that's your collisions, that's tip 2. Now let's go to tip 3. Back to main here. The next one we're doing is animations, tip 3. So let's set up our animation, go to our animation scene. Now we're going to do 3 things here. We're going to create the player like we did previously, but we're going to have animations. We're going to handle the left and right key press and change the animations, and then when you stop moving right, left, and right, we're going to go back to the idle animation. So now we've taken some assets from Kenny. We're using this 1-bit platformer pack in this example. Now we've already added it to our public folder here. So if you're following along, we're using Parcel Bundler or the to make our project. So this is the Parcel Bundler, and in Parcel we have it set up so that we are using this plugin, Parcel plugin, doing clean but also static files copy, which then we're specifying here the public path just be copied into our build when it builds the files together. And so that's how our files are getting from public into being available here in our main to load. So once we have these assets, we need to load it. So we have the actual PNG here. It's tilemap.png. It's just this file. And then now we're going to have to load it so that we can use it. So just check my notes here. Okay, so to load it, we need to do k.load sprite. We're going to use this in our sprite. And let's just call this tiles. And it is located at tilemap.png, since whatever is in public just gets moved to the root. So if you put the tilemap in asset like public /assets/tilemap, it'll be in /assets/tilemap. But we just put it at the root. I'm going to give it a config because our tilemap is a series of tiles. So each 16 by 16 square is 1 tile. And in this case, you can just count it yourself to know. But we've already pre-counted it. And for this example, it is a 20 by 20 grid. So we do slice X, we tell it that's 20 across, slice Y, it is 20, up and down. And now let's add some animation. So we do anims like this. Now in the documentation, it's showing you an example where you send numbers or frame numbers, but that has actually been updated since. The docs may not be updated yet as of this video recording. So if you're trying to add animations, what you actually want to do is give it an object instead of an array of frame numbers, and give it a from and a to. So in our case, our idle is just from 300 to 300. It doesn't really do anything. It's one frame only. And then our run animation is going to be from 301 to 302. Now, how do we find these numbers? So in our tile map here, just bring this up, make that smaller. So these are all, if you split them all into squares, so 20 across, 20 up and down, you've got 400 squares, right? So where 0 is this square, 1 is this square, 2 is this square, 19 is this square, and then let's see, 29 is this square, right? So it's 20 across, 20 across, 20 across. So we're coming down to this guy. I think we're taking, I think these. I guess we'll see, I don't remember. But somewhere here is 300. Just basically have to count. Just do some math, count how many rows you're going down, multiply that by 20, and then just add how many columns you're going across. That's how we got these numbers, 300, 301, and 302. So let's open up our animation scene again. So we're going to create our player. We've loaded our sprites. And this time, very similar to before, we need Kaboom. So let's import k from Kaboom.add. Now we're going to give it k.sprite. That's what we loaded that sprite for. K.sprite, we're using the tile, that's the key we gave that sprite we loaded. Now let's give it an anim speed, just say 0.1, and we're going to start at frame 300. That's our player, that's the sprite. Now let's give it a position component, and let's just start it at the middle, and just middle, k.height. So that's the position. Origin, let's just say it's center, so the origin here, if there's top left, there's top right, bottom left, bottom right, we just want center. So in other engines like Phaser, libraries like Phaser, this is set origin, and you would give it 0.5 just to be smack in the middle. And then let's just give it a scale, and I'll show you why we need that later. So there's that. So let's see. So this uploaded. So here's our dude. This is the 300th frame of that tile map. Now what we want to do is on key press left, let's say, we now want to play an animation, specifically that run animation. So player.play run. So let's try this. Press left, and you see it's running. Now I've unpressed it, right? My hands are here, hands are here. It doesn't stop, so we're going to handle that stopping. I guess this is the to-do. Just put it here. Now also, I'm going to run left. You see it's going right. The animations are only facing one direction. To account for that, we added this scale, which gives us player.scale.x. Let me just flip that -1. Now we press the left key, and now we're running, looks like we're going left, which is what we want. So now let's just do right while we're here, key press, right, which would be exactly the same as this, except our scale is going to be 1. So here's that, right, left. Now we want to do is stop playing, go back to the idle animation, which I guess we can start off by doing. We don't really need to do this because we're saying we're starting at frame 300, but why not? So idle is just, the idle animation is 1 frame, 300th frame, looping over and over again. So we can do is k.key release, and then we can say on release the left key, we want to do player.play idle, and then same thing for the right key. All right, let's try this. Press left, let go left, press right, let go right, and there you have it. That is tip number 3, animations in Kaboom. Now let's go to the next one. Next up here we have creating a level. Alright, let's go to our levels scene. We've got nothing in here. Okay, we have this dummy level. Let me just uncomment this. So levels in Kaboom are specified by arrays of characters, or arrays of strings. So basically this is just blank, and then we have this equal sign, which is going to represent something in our tile map. So let's import Kaboom here, import k from Kaboom here, we're gonna load a level. Let's just double check my notes here. Okay, we wanna load a level, k.load level, nope, sorry, k.add level. These are all in the documentation on the Kaboom.js.com website, by the way. These are all here. I'm just showing you a few of them and how to use it. But there's pretty good examples on this website as well. So now k.add level, now we're just going to add level 1. So the first parameter here in add level is the array of strings defining your level. And so just more deeply, so this array, so this string, right, this row string is the top. So it's going to basically load it top 1 row, 2 row, 3 row, 4 row, blah, blah, blah. And so that's the array we're passing in, an array of strings. And then we give it a conf. And now there's width, which defines the width and height of the individual tile. So each character here, it's saying how big should it be. In our case, for our tile set, it is 16. So our tiles are 16 by 16. So that'll load nothing since it's mostly blank. So we got to give it a rule for how it's going to interpret the equal sign. So this is the floor. That's what we have, the equal sign here. And so what we do is we give it a equals, that's as the key, and then we give it a array of components. And Kaboom will just make a object out of that list of components wherever it sees the equal sign. So we're going to very simply give it a sprite from our tiles, and we're going to use frame 65. And there it is. Snazzy, right? So now let's just add our player from before, so we don't have to do things twice. So let's add our player to our level. And we're going to want to make this physics enabled, so let's just give it a body. And it falls through the floor. So because our floor does not have a physics on it, so let's just do k.solid, and that'll give it the solid component on the floor. See how awesome this sort of component composing is? You can just add functionality to entities in idea only whenever you want, and that basically changes entities just based on what their components are. Okay, so now we have that, and we have our level here. Let's just make our guy move. Why not? Actually, I'm just gonna copy some other code here since we already went through the player, just for expedition. Okay, so now our player will move. Right, so we didn't go over moving a player, but it's just very simply here, this key down and key press for space to jump. So when we do key down from left, we're going to do player.move -100. We do key down because key down is going to fire as long as the key is down versus key press, which is like, you know, a press on it. So it's only one time that it's up and down. And so for left and right, we're going to move -100 for left, +100 for right. And then when we press space, so you see this is key press versus key down, just the single press on space, we're going to jump, give it a jump force of 350. And so we can jump like that. So that's putting a player that can move. Now to make this a little more interesting, we also want to do this. Let's do this one first. So we want the camera to follow our player. So right now you can see I can just sort of walk off, and that's no good. So we can do player.action. What action is, basically call this function every update tick. And what we're going to want to do is do k.cam position equal to player dot, or set it to player dot position. Oops, and then here we go. Now you can't really see that things are kind of moving. You can sort of see. But now let's go back to our level and just like add some other things. Let's say right here, we take 3 slots and add 3 more floors. Yep, ta-da. And then you can also do things like, here's an arrow, no, this arrow, let's say. And when you get here, nothing on this level, so turn around. Every time you add a new character there, you got to handle it. So in our case, we added this, k.sprite. We're going to do it from tiles. And so we have this arrow in our tiles here, and it is going to be frame 92. And then for our other arrow, so now if you're using a different tile set, just use the same rules or the heuristic I was mentioning before to determine what frame you need. In this specific case, frame 92 and frame 93 happens to be these arrows. So now we have this arrow here. You can jump on this platform, go all the way out here, and there's another arrow telling you to go back. This is not a very good level. It's not very fun. But that is the basics of getting a level started, adding things to it, and getting a player in there. Now let's go to our next tip. Tip number 5. Here's our final tip, and probably the most interesting one. At least when you get far enough here using Kaboom, you're going to want to make your own components to add functionality that did not come with Kaboom. Now Kaboom does come with a bunch of components right here. Position, scale, rotate, color, sprite, text, rect, area, solid, body, origin, layer. You can click on these and read more about them. But you can also make your own components, which is where most of the fun lies. Let's go to our component scene here. Now we will need Kaboom like we usually do, as you've noticed. Let's just import that to start. Now we're just going to load or copy most of this level stuff here, since we're going to use that in here. So let's just take all of this to start this example. Right, we need to also take our actual level. So what you can also do, since we're talking about splitting codes into files, is just put your levels into different files, export them, or just one file, export them. You can import them into each file that needs it, but just for this example, we're just going to copy that. So now we have our previous scene set up like we had before. We are now going to add a custom component. So there is examples on the Kaboom website for doing this. What we're going to do is basically take that example. It's the big component. So we made a folder here called components. Here's our component scene in our scenes folder. Right, here's the source, the main. We made another folder called components, and we have our big component, which is also itself just a function. So this is a very functional library, as you can see. So in here, we're going to import Kaboom because we're going to need it. What this is going to do, this is taken from the Kaboom examples, is make our dude bigger. This component will make him 2 times bigger. There's a timer, and after some time, make him small again. And you can check if the entity that this component belongs to is big at the time. That's what is big is. So let's just start. I'm going to build it one step at a time. So to start, we're going to return an empty object. That's how these components work. They are just an object that gets merged into the object that is being made. So it's going to have an isBig, right? We've mentioned that. We're going to do isBig. And isBig is going to return whether you are big or not. So the way to know that is to actually give yourself a parameter, or a variable denoting whether you are big or not. So we'll start out not big, and then we'll return as big. And next we have bigify. So this is us making you big, and let's give it a time so that it'll unbig you, or smallify in this example, after some time. So this expects a scale component. So we can do this.scale k.vec2, which is a vector2, which is like a point. If you're not familiar with vectors, we'll give it 2. And you usually can give it an x and a y, and I'm assuming here with vec2, you give it one value, it assumes both x and y are 2. And that's what the scale is going to be. It's going to double your size from 1 to 2. And you could, of course, also done it like this, right? These two are the same. This line and these 2 lines are basically the same. This creates a new vector. This modifies the vector in place. So either one. I'll just go with that. So then we want to save the time, because we're going to need to know this in our update. So let's go with time. It's going to be, actually it should be 0. And then let's set time to time. Well, let's call it timer, so that we don't shadow variables and confuse ourselves. Timer. Okay. And then we're going to say isBig is true because we made ourselves big in the bigify function here. And then let's do a smallify that does the reverse of bigify before we do the update. So this dot scale, so we do vec2 1, timer will be reset to 0, isBig will be reset to false. Now we also want to do an update, right? So these are the 3 custom functions that we're going to add to the resulting object. There's also a few let's say special functions that you can use. One of them is update, and so this will be called each update tick, and here you can add some logic. So in our case, what we're going to do is if you are big, we are going to do a countdown timer basically. So k.dt, we're going to subtract delta time from the timer, the total time we've set in bigify here. And then once the timer is less than or equal to 0, we're going to do smallify. And that is this custom function. So we've got isBig, bigify, smallify, and this update function is what is going to be in charge of handling that logic to make us small after we've been big for X time as passed into bigify. Of course, we can give it like a default value here. Let's say 2 seconds. Let's come to our custom component here. So we've actually added this component. So what we want is actually to import it. So let's import big from components big. And to use it, like any other component that we've already used, we simply add it to our player. So boom. So we're going to do that. Now, adding that component, nothing is really going to change because it gives us the bigify, smallify, and isBig. So we can actually confirm that that exists. Console.log player. And here's our player, and you will see, let's see, I'm looking for bigify, right? This is the one that we added. isBig, we added that one. And then smallify. And there we go. So now update should also be in here, I think. But that's one of the default ones. Oh wait, no, it's not it won't be shown as a property. It calls it as an event. If you look through the Kaboom source, I believe it is still an event unless that's changed last time I looked at it. But there are some special events that's what Kaboom calls it, that get called on each entity that's created, and update is one of those. So any of your custom functions will show up here, like bigify, smallify, and isBig. So we have that. So what it means is we can actually use it. So let's do k.keyPress, and let's just say b. We're going to do player.bigify, and let's come here. Everything is still working. I'm going to press B, and now I'm huge. Oh, and that was 2 seconds, and I shrank. Now, why it does this weird 2 on the Y and then 1 on the X is because of our logic here in this scale. So what we want to do, just at least for now, player.isBig, right? We have that isBig that we added. If isBig, it's going to be -2, else -1, and for here 2, player.isBig, 2, else 1. So B, and we're walking, and we're giant, and we're small. So there we go. That's how you make a custom component. Now if you want a little bit more about that custom component, you can go to the examples here in the Kaboom.js website. And we really just took this Mario one, this Mario component here. You can see there's the big, here, function big. We basically took that and just showed you how you could make it and separate that out into files and use it in your Kaboom game. So there we go. That is the 5 tips. Let's just double check here. Main.js. Yep, that's it. Those are the 5 tips of getting started with Kaboom.js to make some simple games that should be really fun to actually program. So now if you enjoyed this video, do hit like and hit subscribe for more videos on making games with web technologies like Kaboom.js.